Magnolia Thorne had worked at Nexus Marketing Solutions for 3 years, climbing from junior associate to senior project manager through sheer determination and 60-hour work weeks. At 29, she was known throughout the company as the Iron Lady, someone who never missed deadlines and could handle the most demanding clients. She'd always known her boss, Hendrix Crawford, was demanding, but she never imagined the depths of his discrimination until she made the mistake of sharing her pregnancy news. During their Monday morning meeting, "Pregnant?" Hendrix had said, his coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips. "How far along?" 12 weeks, Magnolia had replied, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "I wanted to tell you early so we could plan for my maternity leave. I know the Morrison account is launching next month, and I want to ensure a smooth transition." The smile that crossed Hendrix's face should have been her first warning. It was the kind of smile a predator gives its prey. "Congratulations, Magnolia. This is unexpected news. We'll need to discuss some adjustments to your workload." Within a week, everything changed. Magnolia found herself excluded from important client meetings that she'd been leading for months. The Morrison account, her biggest project, was suddenly reassigned to junior associate Derek Williams, a man who'd been with the company for only 8 months. Her once packed schedule became mysteriously light, and her input was no longer requested in strategy sessions. When she questioned Hendrix about it, he claimed he was protecting her health and reducing her stress. His concern seemed genuine, but Magnolia couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She'd seen other pregnant women in the office face similar treatment, and most of them had quietly resigned within a few months. The real blow came 3 months later, when Magnolia was visibly showing. Hendrix called her into his office with HR representative Beverly Walsh present, a woman known for her cold efficiency and loyalty to company management above all else. "Magnolia," Hendrix began, his voice dripping with false sympathy as he straightened his expensive tie. "We've noticed a significant decline in your performance since your pregnancy announcement. Your productivity has dropped by 40% according to our metrics. You've missed several critical deadlines, and frankly, your commitment to this company seems to have wavered." Magnolia's heart pounded as she stared at the stack of documents in front of her. She knew her own work better than anyone, and she hadn't missed a single deadline. "That's not true. You've been removing me from projects and—" "I'm afraid we have extensive documentation," Beverly interrupted, her voice as sharp as her perfectly styled black hair. She slid a thick file across the mahogany desk. "Performance reviews, missed meetings, incomplete assignments, complaints from clients about your work quality. We've tried to work with you, Magnolia. We've been more than accommodating, but it's clear that your current condition is affecting your ability to perform your duties at the level this company requires." Magnolia opened the file with trembling hands, her blood running cold as she read through fabricated performance reviews and doctored meeting notes. They'd been building a case against her for months, carefully constructing a narrative that painted her as an incompetent employee whose pregnancy had made her unreliable and unprofessional. There were fake client complaints about her emotional instability and lack of focus, meeting notes that claimed she'd been distracted and unprepared during sessions she'd never even attended, performance metrics that had been manipulated to show declining productivity, despite the fact that she'd been excluded from most of her regular projects. We're offering you a generous severance package. Hendricks continued, sliding another document across the desk. 3 months' salary, plus we'll cover your health insurance through the end of the year. But we'll need your resignation letter by tomorrow morning, and you'll need to sign this non-disclosure agreement. The NDA was comprehensive, preventing her from discussing anything about her employment, her departure, or the company's practices. It was designed to silence her completely. What Hendricks didn't know was that Magnolia Thorne wasn't just any employee. She wasn't even really an employee at all. She was a labor attorney who specialized in employment discrimination cases, and she'd been working at Nexus undercover as part of a carefully orchestrated investigation into workplace discrimination in the marketing industry. Her entire career change story was carefully crafted fiction. She'd graduated from Harvard Law School, worked for the Department of Labor for 5 years, and had spent the last 3 years building the most comprehensive case of workplace discrimination the city had ever seen. "I need to think about this," Magnolia said, her legal training kicking in as she memorized every detail of their conversation. "This is a lot to process." "Of course," Hendricks said, his smile widening. "Take the night. But remember, Magnolia, this is a generous offer. If you fight this, things could get very unpleasant for you." That night, Magnolia sat in her home office, surrounded by 3 years' worth of carefully documented evidence. She'd been recording conversations using sophisticated equipment, photographing documents, and building relationships with other female employees who'd faced similar treatment. Her pregnancy had simply accelerated their timeline. As a labor attorney, Magnolia had access to resources that most employees never dreamed of. She'd been secretly recording conversations, documenting every discriminatory comment, and building a federal case that would expose the systematic discrimination at Nexus Marketing Solutions. The breakthrough came when Magnolia accessed her own personnel file through legal channels. Hidden among the recent fabricated reviews were the real performance evaluations from her first 3 years, all outstanding ratings with comments praising her dedication, creativity, and leadership skills. The contrast was so stark, it was laughable. But Magnolia's investigation revealed something much darker. This wasn't just about her pregnancy. Hendricks had been systematically discriminating against women for years, particularly those who became pregnant or started families. She found evidence of at least 9 other women who'd been forced out under similar circumstances. The evidence was staggering. Email chains where Hendricks discussed the pregnancy problem with other managers, referring to pregnant employees as liabilities and productivity drains. Budget documents showing how he'd calculated the cost of pregnant employees and maternity leave. Even recordings of him joking about breeding stock during executive meetings. He's been running this company like his personal boys' club, Magnolia realized, compiling her evidence. And he's been stupid enough to document everything. The smoking gun came when Magnolia discovered Hendricks's private email account, which she accessed through a former employee who'd been given his login credentials. The emails revealed a systematic plan to eliminate pregnant employees, including detailed strategies for building false performance cases and forcing resignations. On the day she was supposed to submit her resignation, Magnolia arrived at the office with a process server, a federal investigator from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and a camera crew from the local news station. Hendrix's confidence evaporated the moment he saw the official badges. "Mr. Crawford," the investigator said, flashing his credentials, "you're being served with a federal discrimination lawsuit, and we have a warrant to search your office, computers, and all company records related to employee terminations." Hendrix's face went pale as he watched federal agents begin boxing up his files. "This is ridiculous. Magnolia, tell them this is all a misunderstanding." Magnolia stood up, her voice steady and professional as the cameras rolled. "The only misunderstanding here is yours, Hendrix. You thought you were dealing with a helpless, pregnant employee, but what you actually did was commit federal crimes against a labor attorney who specializes in exactly the kind of discrimination you've been practicing for years." The evidence was overwhelming. Hendrix's emails, the fabricated performance reviews, audio recordings of discriminatory comments, and testimony from other victimized employees all painted a clear picture of systematic discrimination. But Magnolia had one more surprise. "Your Honor," Magnolia said, addressing the judge during the preliminary hearing, "I'd like to present evidence that Mr. Crawford has been running a deliberate scheme to eliminate pregnant employees from his company, and that this scheme extends beyond Nexus Marketing Solutions." Hendrix's eyes widened in horror as Magnolia revealed the full scope of her investigation. She'd discovered that Hendrix had been consulting with other companies in the industry, sharing strategies for avoiding maternity leave costs and eliminating pregnant employees without legal consequences. The judge's expression hardened as Magnolia presented emails between Hendrix and executives at 5 other marketing firms, detailing methods for handling the pregnancy problem and maintaining productivity standards. "Mr. Crawford," the judge said sternly, "given the severity of these charges and the systematic nature of the discrimination, I'm granting a preliminary injunction against your company and ordering a full federal investigation into your practices and those of your associates." Hendrix broke down completely, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Magnolia, please. I'll promote you to vice president. I'll give you whatever you want. Just don't destroy my company." But Magnolia felt no sympathy. "You destroyed women's careers for years. You made mothers feel worthless. You created a toxic environment where women were afraid to start families. You systematically stole opportunities from qualified employees based on their biology. You don't get to ask for mercy now." The trial lasted 8 months and became a landmark case in employment discrimination law. Hendrix was found guilty of systematic discrimination and ordered to pay $3.2 million in damages to the affected employees. His company was forced to implement comprehensive anti-discrimination policies and undergo federal monitoring. But the real victory came when Magnolia's investigation led to federal charges against the entire network of companies that had been sharing discriminatory practices. Working with federal investigators, she helped expose an industry-wide conspiracy that had been denying opportunities to women for over a decade. The case became a catalyst for change throughout the marketing industry. New federal regulations were implemented, whistleblower protections were strengthened, and companies nationwide began revising their policies to avoid similar lawsuits. Magnolia not only won her case, but also received recognition from the American Bar Association for her undercover work. She used the settlement money to establish the Thorn Foundation, a legal clinic that provides free representation to women facing workplace discrimination. 12 months after Hendrix's conviction, Magnolia stood in her new law office, holding her newborn daughter Juliana. She'd named her practice Thorne and Associates, fighting for working families, and her waiting room was filled with women who'd heard about her victory and wanted help with their own cases. "I'm sorry you had to grow up in a world where your mother had to fight for basic rights," Magnolia whispered to her daughter. "But I made sure that world is a little bit better for you and every other working mother." Hendrix had thought he was clever, systematically eliminating pregnant employees to maximize profits and avoid the inconvenience of maternity leave. But he'd made the fatal mistake of targeting the wrong woman. Magnolia's father had raised her to be strong, intelligent, and principled, qualities that had served her well in bringing down a serial discriminator. As the sun set over the city, Magnolia realized that her greatest victory wasn't the money she'd won or the recognition she'd received. It was the precedent she'd set. Her case had changed employment law and protected countless women from facing the same discrimination she'd witnessed. Hendrix was serving community service, his reputation destroyed, and his company had been sold to new management that implemented progressive family-friendly policies. He'd spent years building his discriminatory corporate culture, and it had all come crashing down because he'd underestimated one pregnant lawyer who refused to be a victim. The 9 other women who'd been discriminated against had all received substantial settlements. Several had started their own companies, using their settlement money to become entrepreneurs and create the kind of supportive work environments they'd always wanted. Magnolia's investigation had also led to industry-wide changes. The marketing industry had implemented new guidelines for pregnancy discrimination, and several other companies had voluntarily revised their policies to avoid similar lawsuits. But the most satisfying moment came when Magnolia received a letter from a young woman named Zara, who'd been inspired by her case to report discrimination at her own company. "Because of your courage," Zara wrote, "I felt empowered to speak up when my boss started treating me differently after I got engaged. My company settled immediately and changed their policies. You didn't just save your own career, you saved mine too." Magnolia framed the letter and hung it in her office, next to her law degree and the photograph of her father who'd taught her that justice was worth fighting for, no matter how powerful the opposition. As she tucked her daughter into her crib that night, Magnolia reflected on how her father's lessons had shaped her into the woman she'd become. He'd taught her that sometimes the greatest victories come from the battles you never expected to fight. Hendrix had thought he was dealing with a vulnerable pregnant employee who would quietly accept his discrimination. Instead, he'd encountered a skilled attorney who'd spent years preparing for exactly this kind of fight. His discrimination had been systematic and calculated, but so had her response. The case had changed everything, not just for Magnolia, but for working mothers everywhere. Federal law had been strengthened, corporate policies had been reformed, and a new generation of women knew they didn't have to accept discrimination as the price of motherhood. Years later, when law schools taught courses on employment discrimination, they would use Magnolia's case as the perfect example of how one person's courage and preparation could bring down an entire system of oppression. She'd proven that justice wasn't just an ideal, it was something worth fighting for, one case at a time.